Critical study. David Benatar, better never to have been. The harm of coming into existence. Elizabeth Harman, Princeton. Excuse me. In this book, David Benatar argues that every person is severely harmed by being brought into existence, and that in bringing any person into existence, one impermissibly harms that person. His conclusion is not merely that by bringing a person into existence, one harms him. That claim is compatible with the claim that by bringing a person into existence, one also greatly benefits him, and even with the claim that one never impermissibly harms someone by bringing him into existence. His conclusion is much more radical. Oh, aren't you the radical, Benatar? Conclusion. In all actual cases of procreation, in all, highlight that, all actual cases of procreation, or failure to procreate when one could, procreation is and would be wrong. Benatar has two independent lines of argument for his conclusion. He is explicit that they are independent. Wait. I wonder what he's... I mean, he presents a lot of asymmetries. Like, isn't there like 4 or whatever? Like, he said the axiological asymmetry needs to be coupled with the value of life asymmetry, right? I have to read that book again. All right. Benatar has two independent lines of argument for his conclusion. He is explicit that they are independent and that the second does not rely on the first. The first is an argument for his view. First view, by bringing someone into existence, one harms her by causing all the bad aspects of her life. By bringing someone into existence, one does not benefit her at all by causing the good aspects of her life. The second line of argument involves arguing for this view. Second view, taking into account both the good and the bad aspects of a person's life, most lives are overall very bad and not worth living. Yeah, value of life argument. I don't even know if that's what it's called. In section 1 of this critical study, I examined what is attractive about the first view. However, in section 2, I argue that one argument Benatar makes for the first view, the one on which I think he places the most weight, fails. In section 3, I argue that Benatar's arguments for his second view do a good job of raising the worry that our lives may be worse than we think. But I argue that he doesn't succeed in establishing the fact that our lives are actually overall bad. In section 4, I don't know, I discussed some further implications of his conclusion. I thought this was a book review. I guess not. Critical study. Okay. Benatar's... Is this the paper? Do any of you know if this is like when he made a paper, Still Better Never to Have Been? Was this the paper that he was replying to? Do you guys know? Still better never to have been. All right. Harman. Harman. Working on it. Work faster. Come on. My poor computer. Critical study of Benatar. Oh, okay. So yeah, we're on the right paper. Cool. Cool. All right. Benatar's first view. The first view is that we harm people terribly when we create them, but we do not benefit them at all. This would explain a fact that that is otherwise hard to explain, namely that it is sometimes wrong to procreate for the sake of the person created, although the person would have a life worth living. The relevant class of cases are often discussed in connection with the non-identity problem. I have a feeling she's going to have a different view of the non-identity problem. That someone isn't worse off. I have a feeling this is where she's going. Suppose a woman has a temporary condition such as if she conceives now, she will have a child who will have a congenital disease that will cause some suffering and death around the age of 40. Okay. Suppose that if she waits and conceives later, she will have an ordinary healthy child. It is generally agreed that we should wait, but there is a problem in explaining why. Even someone who dies at 40 is likely to have a life well worth living. The puzzle is typically stated as follows. One may harm someone by giving him a life of agony, but how can one harm someone by giving him a life worth living? I like the non-identity problem. It is an interesting philosophical puzzle, but when you're talking to just talking to people day to day, I don't know. This puzzle doesn't normally come up. How can one be required, for the person's sake, to act in such a way that he never exists at all rather than exists with this congenital disease? However, we might state the puzzle a slightly different way. We might say this. We ordinarily believe these three things. 1. Ordinary procreation is permissible. 2. Procreation is a temporary condition, case above, is not permissible. 3. Creating a person whose life would be utter misery is not permissible. Okay. We ordinarily believe these three things. Okay, yeah, I see where she's going with that. I agree with her so far. And I feel like this is helping Benatar's case. In ordinary cases, procreation is permissible, although we bring someone into a life that involves both good and bad aspects. The natural thing to say about why, 1, is true, is that the good aspects more than outweighs the bad aspects. People ordinarily have lives well worth living. But then it's hard to explain why. 2 is true. The person who dies at 40 still have a life worth living. The puzzle is typically taken to be a puzzle about justifying 2. Some take the puzzle to show that 2 is simply not true. Benatar's view resolves the puzzle in a very different way. He argues that 1 is not true, and we can see the following argument in his discussion. If we are to take seriously that it is wrong to procreate in the temporary conditioned state because of the badness of suffering from the disease, then we must conclude that the first view is true. If we are to take seriously that it is wrong to procreate in the temporary condition case because of the badness of suffering from the disease, then we must conclude that the first... Right. Okay, yeah, I'm with her so far. Mod, yes, I agree. I think the non-identity problem is a worthy philosophical territory. Agreed. I want to read up more on it. That is, we harm people by causing the bad aspects of their lives, but we do not benefit them by causing the good aspects of their lives. But then it follows that it is in general wrong to procreate, because all the bad things ordinary people experience. Benatar's book also contains the following argument for the first view. He points out that we typically think it is wrong to procreate if the person who would be created would have a life that is sufficiently worse than a typical human life, and observes that it is not clear why this is a relevant cutoff. He points out that we can imagine lives that would be much better than ours, involving many fewer hardships. If such lives were commonly lived, then it would seem we would think it's impermissible to create people who live lives that ordinary people actually live. That's an interesting twist. But why is what is normal relevant to what lives it is permissible to create in this way? ? This kind of objection has been used to defend the permissibility of procreation if... Example, the person created will be disabled. If what is normal for the species is not a reasonable cutoff, then it is not wrong to procreate and create someone less well off than the norm. Benatar flips this argument on its head. Rather than saying that what is normal for the species sets too high a bar for permissible procreation, he claims that it is too low a bar. Assuming the common view that it is wrong to procreate if we'll be creating a person with a less good life than most people have, he argues that it should lead us to realize it's wrong to procreate in ordinary cases. Alright, the first view does seem to imply Benatar's conclusion. Alright, any life, in fact, involves considerable pains along the way. if in procreating we are harming by causing all of these pains, but we are not benefiting by causing the good aspects of the created person's life, then procreation is impermissible harming. Part 2. Benatar's main argument for his first view. All right, so far we're good. Benatar's main argument for his first view occurs in chapter 2 of the book. He begins the argument with an appeal to intuition. He claims that the following asymmetry holds. It's definitely an appeal to intuition. And for the people that are watching, yeah, it's based on these axiomatic values or intuitions. The presence of pain is bad. The absence of pain, in the absence of anyone who would have experienced the pain, is good. B, the presence of pleasure is good, but the absence of pleasure in the absence of anyone who would have been experienced pleasure is not bad, nor, of course, it is good. We've heard this 100 times. This is my wording of the claim. Yeah. All right. Thus, Benatar claims that whenever we fail to create an ordinary person, this is in one way good, due to the absence of all the suffering that the person would have experienced. But this is not in any way bad, because the absence of all the pleasure the person would have experienced is not bad. Okay. He then argues that the asymmetry implies that when we procreate, we harm the created person, but we do not benefit her. We will first present the argument as he states it, and then try to explain what I think is going on. Okay. Let's go, Elizabeth Harman. He argues that we need to compare the situation in which we do procreate with the situation in which we do not. All right? If we do procreate, then there are two relevant things. One, the presence of pain, which is bad, and two, the presence of pleasure, which is good. If we do not procreate, there are two relevant things. 3, the absence of pain, which is good, and 4, the absence of pleasure, which is not bad. Yeah. Again, we've heard that a lot. Those quotes are from a chart on page 38. He says, please don't, are you going to repeat it again? All right. To determine the relative advantages and disadvantages of coming into existence and never coming to be, we need to compare 1 with 3 and 2 with 4. In the first comparison, we see that non-existence is preferable to existence. Non-existence has an advantage over existence. In the second comparison, however, the pleasures of the existence, although good, are not an advantage over the non-existence, because the absence of pleasure is not bad. For the good to have an advantage over non-existence, it would have to be the case that its absence were bad. Wait, I don't get that last one. For the good to be an advantage over non-existence, it would have to have been the case that its absence were bad. Right. Okay, got it. This passage is puzzling. Is it? Holy crap. Have I read it so many times that it makes sense to me and you know how many freaking times I've heard this argument that it's it's my intuition now. I don't even see the puzzle anymore. But okay, see, there's my bias. This passage is puzzling, but I think it contains the argument for Benatar's first view, on which he intends to rest the most weight. So it is worth careful examination. I agree, Elizabeth Harman. Here is my reconstruction of the argument. Why? Why do you need a reconstruction? I feel like it was you did a good job of saying it above before. Here is my reconstruction of the argument. It begins with assuming the asymmetry is true. Okay. Oh, so she's going to present an argument against it. Well, whatever, we'll see. Then it relies on something like the following claim. An action harms a person by causing some effects only if experiencing those effects is worse for her than the alternative, namely, not experiencing those effects in the scenario in which the action is not performed. An action benefits a person by causing some effects only if the person those effects is better for her than the alternative, namely, not experiencing those effects in the scenario in which the action is not performed. All right. I attribute asterisks, that's an asterisk, right? To Benatar, because it is a way to make sense of two of his claims. One, that we should compare a created person's pain with its absence, and his pleasure with its absence rather than comparing the combination of his pain and his pleasure with their absence. And 2, the comparison of a created person's pain with its absence, which he says is good, shows the absence to have an advantage, while the comparison of a created person's pleasure with its absence, which he says is neither good nor bad, does not show the pleasure as having an advantage. Is compatible with the claim that in ordinary non-procreative situations, causing someone pain harms her and causing someone pleasure benefits her. Ordinarily, in the relevant alternative in which the action is not performed, the person exists and simply doesn't experience the effect. Experiencing pain is worse than existing. And not experiencing pain, experiencing pleasure, is better than existing and not experiencing pleasure. Okay. Relying on that argument, Benatar claims that we do harm someone we bring into existence in virtue of all the pain in her life. Because if she does exist, then she experiences the pain, and that is bad. But if she doesn't exist, then the pain doesn't exist, and that is good, by appeal of the asymmetry. Thus, because what is bad is worse than what is good, by causing the pain in her life, we harm her. However, Benatar claims a parallel claim cannot be made about the good aspects of a person's life. However, Benatar claims a parallel claim cannot be made about the good aspects of a person's life. Right, so, okay. It is not the case that we benefit someone by causing the pleasure and good aspects of her life. Benatar says that the good things in a person's life are not better than their absence, because their absence is not bad. Indeed, it has no value at all. I feel like we're going in circles. Nor, Benatar points out, is the alternative that the person is in a neutral state. Rather, in the alternative, she doesn't exist at all. He concedes that it is better to have pleasure than to be in a neutral state. However, he says, if what we are comparing is something good with something that lacks any value at all, I think he means it does not even have a neutral value. Wait, what? He says, if what we are comparing is something good with something that lacks any value at all, I think he means it does not even have a neutral value. Then it's not true that the good things is better than the other. Okay? So having the good things in their lives is not better for those who are brought into existence than the alternative, so they are not benefited. I have 3 objections to this argument. Yes, finally. I will proceed backwards. Okay? First, granting much of the argument and objecting to a late step in it, and then objecting to an earlier part of the argument. So let's grant that the asymmetry is true. All right. And let's grant that the other argument is true. Fine. My first objection is that it does not seem to me to follow that we harm a person by bringing her into existence and causing the pain in her life. Rather, I think that this step in the argument equivocates between impersonal goodness and goodness for a person. Okay. Was this similar to what Cabrera said? This does sound familiar. The plausible reading of part A of the asymmetry is this. A1. The presence of pain is bad, both for the one who experiences it and also impersonally. And the absence of pain, in the absence of anyone who would have experienced the pain, is impersonally good. Okay. But what Benatar needs is this claim. A2. The presence of pain is bad for the one who experiences it. Okay. And the absence of pain in the absence of anyone who would have experienced the pain, is good for the person who would have experienced the pain and does not actually exist. I need a moment to reflect on this. Let me go over it one more time. A1, the presence of pain is bad, both for the one who experiences it and also impersonally. And the absence of pain, in the absence of anyone who would have experienced the pain, is impersonally good. Okay. Sure. All right, I'm with you on A1, but what Benatar needs is this claim. A2, the presence of pain is bad for the one who experiences it. Okay. And the absence of pain, the absence of anyone who would have experienced the pain, is good for the person who would have experienced the pain. Okay. And does not actually exist. I'm sorry, isn't that what Benatar is claiming? Chat, help me out here. Isn't A2 what Benatar is saying? I'm pretty sure that's what he's saying. Benatar isn't making an impersonal claim, though. Well, she doesn't provide that chart, does she? No. It would have been easier with the chart. Wasn't that value asymmetry talking about an impersonal benefit? Let me bring it up. The absence of benefit 0, absence of harm plus, presence of harm minus. Oh. I searched for it on Google and I found Eric's paper rejecting the asymmetry. I should look into that. Okay. So if the person exists, these things follow. But if the person doesn't exist, that would be an impersonal claim, would it not? The absence of pain is good if the person doesn't exist. So doesn't that make it impersonal, Saran? Like, isn't scenario B talking about impersonal? Or am I thinking impersonal is different in this regard to Harman? All right, let's get past this section. If Benatar is to rely on the argument to yield the conclusion that we harm someone by bringing her into existence, we need it to be the case that the pain she experiences, if she exists, is bad for her, which is clearly true. No. But the absence of that pain, like, there doesn't need to be a person. Because what about that case that was brought up? Where is it? That 40-year-old, right? That where is it? Right. How can one be required for the person's sake to act in such a way that he never exists at all rather than exists with this congenial disease? Suppose a woman has a temporary condition such that if she conceives now, she will have a child who will have a congenial disease that will cause some suffering and death around the age of 40. Suppose that if she waits and conceives later, she will have an ordinary healthy child. It is generally agreed that she should wait. So if you accept that, then I feel like it follows. Mod. I think both A1 and A2 would be true in a Benatarian sense. No? That's exactly what I'm thinking. That's why I'm confused right now. If I remember, Saran, I'm glad that you... Okay, I'm glad that you're on the same page. All right, Saran, if I remember correctly, her issue was the same as Corbera. Yeah, they look very similar. He uses two different notions of a person. In 3, he uses a counterfactual, and in 4, an empty notion. All right, let me not like get hooked up on just this section. All right. All right. If Benatar is to rely to yield the conclusion that we harm someone by bringing her into existence, he needs it to be the case that the pain she experiences, if she exists, is bad for her, which is clearly true. The absence of that pain in the alternative in which she is not brought into existence is better for her, not impersonally better. Okay. This suggests that perhaps Benatar intends to establish that we harm people, but do not benefit them by bringing them into existence, without appeal to a claim like... I don't know what to say about that. Like the argument. In that case, I am not sure how his argument is supposed to go. This suggests that perhaps Benatar intends to establish that we harm people, but do not benefit them by bringing them into existence, without appeal to a claim like the star or whatever. Hold on. I gotta reflect on this for a second. All right. In that case, I am not sure how his argument is supposed to go, or why he emphasizes the comparison between the badness of the existence of pain and the goodness of its absence, and the purported lack of comparability between the goodness of the existence of pleasure and the non-badness of the absence of pleasure. Perhaps what Benatar has in mind relies mainly on claim A1. If pain exists, that is impersonally bad, while from A1, the absence of pain is impersonally good. So, by bringing someone into existence, we bring about a bad thing rather than a good thing. Whereas, as regards pleasure, while the existence of pleasure is good, the absence of pleasure is, from the asymmetry, neither bad nor good. All right. But then it's hard to see how we get the result that it's bad to bring someone into existence. Or even if we do get that result, it's hard to see how we get the conclusion that we harm the person, as opposed to merely getting the conclusion that we do something impersonally worse. Rather, it seems we get the result that if we bring someone into existence, there are some bad things and some good things. Whereas if we don't, there are some good things, the absence of pain. This doesn't show that what's better without a comparison between the sum of the good things and the bad things of existence. On the one hand, and the good things of non-existence on the other hand. Isn't that what the whole chart is about? Doesn't that do that? Isn't that exactly what is... This doesn't show that it's better without a comparison between the sum of the good things and the bad things of existence on the one hand. Oh, the sum of what the person would have had, or okay, I think I understand where this is going. Like good things are not existent, but Benatar denies, in the argument from his first view, that we need to consider how good the good things in a person's life are. So I infer he is not relying on A1 in this way. My second objection to Benatar's argument is to the asymmetry. I think that what's intuitively attractive about the asymmetry can be explained in other ways. In particular, we clearly have strong reasons to avoid causing people to suffer, including to avoid doing what will bring someone into existence who will suffer horribly. Our positive reactions, our reasons to cause people to have good experiences, are much weaker. When we fail to bring someone into existence who would have suffered horribly, then we have failed to do something we should have not have done. We have acted rightly, and we have avoided causing a bad state of affairs. None of that there is anything... What? None of that implies that there is anything good about the current situation. But it might be mistakenly thought to imply that. So I think part A of the asymmetry is false, but intuitively appealing. Okay. An independent objection to the asymmetry goes as follows. It seems that whatever can be said in favor of A can be said in favor of the denial of B. If we are reading A as A1, then it seems that what makes it impersonally good, that some suffering is not occurring, is that it would have been bad if the suffering had occurred. Benatar actually says this in an alternative explanation in the book. Oh. But then it seems it should be impersonally bad that something is not happening that would have been good. At least I don't think that's what at least I don't see why that wouldn't also be true. Or if we are reading A as A2, then it seems that what makes it good for the non-existent person we might have created, that his suffering not occur, is that his suffering would have been bad for him. But then it seems it should be bad for the non-existent person we might have created, that his pleasure not occur, because it would have been good for him if it had occurred. Benatar's second view. Benatar's argument for his second view does not rely on the claim that we do not benefit people when we bring them into existence. Rather, the argument proceeds by claiming that if we look carefully at both the good and the bad aspects of persons' lives, we will see that all lives are very bad and not worth having. Benatar acknowledges that most people tend to think that their own lives and most people's lives are overall good and well worth living. So he argues on two fronts. He argues that these judgments can be explained away, and he argues that our lives are worse than we realize. Benatar points out that people have certain psychological tendencies which would make us less aware of how bad our lives really are. There is a phenomenon of Pollyannaism in which people tend to see whatever happens as for the best, and there is a phenomena of adjustment in which people go back to their old attitudes about their lives after a sufficient amount of time has passed, after a change in the quality of their lives, even if their lives have in fact gotten worse. For example, people adjust to having to use a wheelchair. Benatar also points out that when people evaluate how good their lives are, they do not pay attention to the bad features of their lives that are features of all human lives. That is, we typically address ourselves to the question, how good is my life for a human life, or compared to other human lives? But Benatar points out, if all human lives are very bad and not worth having, we wouldn't discover that fact or be sensitive to it by asking this question. Benatar claims that every day people undergo discomforts that make our lives worse, but that we do not factor into the evaluations of how good our lives are. Every day we spend some time hungry, sometime tired, and sometimes thirsty. For example, speaking of which, gotta drink some water. We also undergo ordinary aches and pains as part of our normal life. I want to raise two objections to this point. First, it's not clear to me that we do each have experiences on a regular basis that can be described as being hungry. Wait, what? First, it's not clear to me that we do each have experiences on a regular basis that can be described as being hungry, being tired, and being thirsty, that are actually bad experiences. Oh, okay. I was like, are you denying that we're hungry and tired and thirsty at times? What? Okay. But yeah, that are actually bad experiences. I think these experiences are often neutral. Or even good. Right. I see where that's going. They're like signals, you know, to alleviate, or to, you know, like I have a signal to drink water so that it's instrumentally good. There's utility in it. Benatar counsels against thinking that these experiences are good merely because it feels good to alleviate them. I agree that does not make them good experiences themselves. A more serious objection appeals to the Millian notion of higher quality pleasures. Suppose we grant to Benatar that ordinary lives contain many minor distresses that we do not normally pay attention to in considering how good our lives are. Nevertheless, we might claim there are certain positive features of our lives that are much more valuable than these negative features are bad. Having loving relationships, doing work that we find rewarding, these experiences can be so valuable that they render the ordinary discomforts Benatar describes comparatively insignificant. We need not go so far as Mill in saying that there is higher quality pleasures that are more valuable, regardless of amount, than lower quality pleasures. But we can say that some features of a life are very valuable and can easily outweigh many mundane discomforts. Benatar does go on to point out that besides minor everyday discomforts, most lives contain some significant bad experiences. People often die from painful illnesses. Many people die young. Many people live in parts of the world where disease and warfare shape daily lives. Yet the view that there are higher quality pleasures is a powerful tool against these worries that Benatar raises. It may be that even a life beset by cancer at a young age is well worth living because of the good experiences it contains. Excuse me. Indeed, that is what is ordinarily believed. But Benatar doesn't directly address the thought that some pleasures are of a different kind and therefore have much more value than any pains have disvalue. This does raise the question whether there are higher quality pains. If there are some experiences that have very strong disvalue, then the mere fact that many lives have considerable higher quality pleasures in them does not show that these lives are, all things considered, worth living. I'm not sure whether there are higher quality pains. It seems to me that there are not, although a possible case might be knowing that one's children are suffering horribly. Benatar's second view implies his conclusion as follows. First, most lives are not very bad to have. First, most lives are very bad to have. Oh. So, by causing someone to live such a life, one is causing something very bad to someone. This is plausibly impermissible harming. Second, even if one causes a person to live a very unusual life that is actually worth having, one couldn't have known in advance that the life would be worth having, because most lives are bad. It is impermissible to take the risk involved in procreation, he claims. Other issues. Benatar considers a number of implications of his conclusion, of which I will discuss only two. He points out that because he claims we seriously and impermissibly harm people whenever we procreate, his conclusion potentially provides a rationale for laws against procreation. Some may argue that whether one procreates is a personal decision which one might have a prima facie right to make oneself. But if real harm is at stake, then the right to decide for oneself whether one becomes a parent is not going to hold up. In general, the right to make basic decisions in our own lives does not entitle us to harm others. Nevertheless, Benatar says that it does not follow from his conclusion that there should be laws against procreation. I agree with him on that. He draws an analogy to the debate about abortion law. Some people think that abortion is morally wrong, killing of a living thing. If those people are right, then there is an excellent rationale for laws that prohibit abortion, but some people argue that the fact that there is reasonable disagreement about whether abortion is morally impermissible, permissible killing makes it... Oh my gosh. But some people argue that the fact that there is reasonable disagreement about whether abortion is morally impermissible killing makes it illegitimate to make laws that prohibit abortion. If those people are right, then similarly, if there is reasonable disagreement about whether procreation is always a great harm, which there is, then it is illegitimate to prohibit procreation. The analogy seems right to me. Good. Glad they both agree on this then. Second, Benatar claims that his conclusion does not imply that we should all commit suicide. It is easy to see why his first view does not yield this result. Good. His first view is that when we are procreating, it is irrelevant what good experiences the person will have because there is nothing bad about the good experiences failing to occur. This view about procreation does not imply that it is irrelevant that what good experiences one would have in the future when one is deciding whether to commit suicide. This view about procreation does not imply that it is irrelevant what good experiences one would have in the future when one is deciding whether to commit suicide. Benatar points out that his second view does not, strictly speaking, imply that we should commit suicide. On his view, a life may be so bad that it is not worth starting, but it may be good enough to be worth continuing, because someone who exists may have an interest in continuing to exist. But I think his argument for the second view, if successful, does imply that we should commit suicide. He does not claim that our lives are in general just bad enough to be not worth starting, but not so bad that we should not be worth continuing. Let me read that one more time. He does not claim that our lives are in general just bad enough to be not worth starting. He does not claim that our lives are in general just bad enough to be not worth starting, but not so bad that they are not worth continuing. Rather, he argues that our lives are awful. If, in taking into account both the good and the bad aspects of our lives, it turns out that our lives are overall very bad, then it seems we would each be better off to commit suicide. It seems that the kinds of arguments Benatar makes would make work as well. I feel like I'm losing... All right. It seems that the kinds of arguments So Benatar addresses this, right? Like once you're in existence, then the threshold is different for the goods, the benefits, and the harms. They're weighed differently in that regard. It seems that the kinds of arguments Benatar makes would work as well for most of us if they are just focused on the future. It's no part of his view that the good parts of a life tend to be later in the life. I'm so glad that I'm at the end of this because it's no part of his view that the good parts of a life tend to be later in the life. And the bad parts earlier, so that by killing ourselves, we would be losing out on the better parts. Perhaps we have other directed obligations not to commit suicide. But at least when considering what is best for ourselves, it seems to me that if Benatar's argument for his second view succeed, then we would be better off to kill ourselves. Some notes. The problem is extensively discussed in part of Reasons and Persons. Yeah. I believe it was introduced in Kafka's The Paradox of Future Individuals, and in Parfit's Future Generations, Future Problems. My own view of the problem is given in Can We Harm and Benefit in Creating? And Harming as Causing Harm. Oh, Wasserman is in there. Oh. Okay. While I do see this argument from the first view in the book, it is not in the section of the book devoted to the first view. The argument is suggested by passages from the part of the book aimed at supporting the second view. Benatar tells me he intends that the asymmetry be read as entirely about goodness and badness for the person who would have been created, and not at all about impersonal goodness and badness. My central objection is then the one I have just stated in the main text. If we are willing to grant that the absence of something that would have been bad for someone is good for him, that is, good relative to his interests, even in a world where he doesn't exist, then it seems that the absence of something that would have been good for him is bad for him. That is, bad relative to his interests, even in a world where he doesn't exist. It seems that Benatar needs a more general asymmetry of goodness and badness to underline his asymmetry of pleasure and pain, but that more general asymmetry is not discussed by him, and is implausible. But that more general asymmetry is not discussed by him, and is implausible. Thanks to David Benatar, Peter, Graham, Alex Guerrero, Sarah McGrath, and Michael Rescorla for helpful comments on this critical study. Okay. Let's see how Benatar responds to this. I'm not going to read like all 30 pages, but just... Impersonally better, or better for a person. All right. Some of those who have responded to my argument seem to be uncertain what exactly I'm claiming when I argue that the absence of pain of non-existent people is good and the absence of pleasure of non-existent people is not bad. More specifically, they wonder whether there are impersonal evaluations or whether there are judgments about what is good or not bad for the person who would otherwise have existed. An impersonal evaluation, as it is usually understood, makes no reference to the interests of a particular person. Instead, is an evaluation that something is good or bad without there being a good or bad for somebody. To clarify, what I hope would already been clear, I am not making an impersonal evaluation. I'm concerned instead with whether coming into existence is in the interests of the person who comes into existence, or whether it would have been better for that person if he had never been. I'm interested in whether coming into existence is better or worse for that person, rather than with whether, for example, the world would be better if he existed. Part of the confusion arises, I think, because people have different difficulty making sense of the idea that never existing can be better for a person who never exists. This, it is argued, is because in the case of those who never exist, there is no subject for whom never existing would be a benefit. Thus, de Grazia, for example, writes that only actual beings have interests. Now, if one does bring a child into existence when one should not have done so because the child's prospects were so poor, then there is a victim of one's wrongful choice, the actually existing child. But it does not follow from this, nor does it make much sense in my judgment, to claim that some indeterminate, merely possible childs benefit from a decision not to bring them into existence. Now, it is obviously the case that if someone never comes into existence, there is no actual person who is thereby benefit. However, we can still claim that it is better for a person that he never exists, on a condition that we understand the locution as a shorthand for a more complex idea. The more complex idea is this. We are comparing two possible worlds, one in which a person exists and one in which does not. Which he does not. One way in which we can judge which of these possible worlds is better is with reference to the interests of the person who exists in one, and only one, of these two possible worlds. Obviously, those interests only exist in the possible world in which the person exists, but this does not preclude our making judgments about the value of an alternative possible world, and doing so with reference to the interests of the person in the possible world in which he does exist. Thus, we can claim of somebody who exists that it would be better for him if he had never existed. If somebody does not exist, we can state of him that he had. If somebody does not exist, we can state of him that had he existed, it would have been better for him if he had never existed. In each case, we are claiming something about somebody who exists in one or two alternative possible worlds. Okay, this line of thought applies not only to the locution, am I saying that? A locution that is always better never to come into existence. It also applies to related locutions, including claim 3 of the basic asymmetry, that the absence of pain is good, even if that good is not enjoyed by anybody. The absence of pain is good, even if that good is not enjoyed by anybody. The judgment that it is good could be made impersonally, but I am making it with reference to the interests of the person who would exist in an alternative possible world. Similarly, when we claim that we avoid bringing a suffering child into existence for that child's sake, we do not literally mean that non-existent people have a sake. Instead, it is shorthand for stating that when we compare two possible worlds and we judge the matter in terms of interests of the person who exists in one but not the other of these worlds, we judge the world in which he does not exist to be better. Some literalists might resist such a move. They might insist that for one possible world to be better than another, for somebody, that person must exist in both possible worlds. The problem with this approach is that it exhibits a Procrucian insistence that unusual cases, which cases of bringing people into existence certainly are, must conform to more typical cases in which we make judgments about what is better for somebody. This sort of dogmatism is exactly what gives rise to the non-identity problem. We're always coming back to the non-identity problem. Which is, after all, a problem. The way to resolve this problem, to employ Wittgenstein's analogy of the fly, is to find a way out of the linguistic bottle. More specifically, where did he write that? More specifically, I suggest we must recognize that procreational cases are different from ordinary cases, and that our language has to take into account of those differences. Where did he write that? Oh, Wittgenstein, there we go. Philosophical Investigations. Do I have that? One sec. I don't think I do. I think I just have the Tractatus, or... Philosophical Investigations. Which came first? The Tractatus Philosophicus? Is a work by Wittgenstein. The book was... Oh, this was after. Okay. Okay, this view can be seen to contradict or disregard much of what he argued in his early work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. Yeah, okay. I think I tried to get this, but there were so many different versions. Let me, Amazon.ca. I guess I should just get that one. Oh wait, there is only... The German with a revised English 50th anniversary. It doesn't seem that's like it's available. Whoa. I'm not... 49 bucks. A newer version of this item. Okay. Never mind. I guess there's only one there. Hardcover or paperback? I'll probably get the paperback. Alright. I'm going to save that for later. Chat, what do you think? Do you think Benatar addressed that appropriately with these possible worlds comparison? What do you think? What do you think? Do you think that's adequate? I think if you deny the asymmetry, you bite the bullet that bringing into existence bad lives doesn't harm anybody. Well, wait, like it was quoted that de Grazia accepted that it does hurt someone. So de Grazia says, only actual beings have interest. Now, if one does bring a child into existence when one should not have done so because the child's prospects were so poor, then there is a victim of one's wrongful choice. So if that is true, and it would have been better that they didn't exist, or maybe he's saying that it's not good that they would have existed, it's that there's nobody harmed. But it does not follow from this, nor does it make much sense in my judgment, to claim that some indeterminate, merely possible child benefits from a decision not to bring him into existence. Okay, well, I mean, but he's accepting that someone is harmed if you bring them into existence with a poor quality of life, right? So I feel like if you accept that, then it follows. I still think it works. I don't know. What do you think, chat? And by the way, I'm going to be posting Elizabeth Harman's paper in this group. And I think if you're interested in antinatalism philosophy and these papers on it, join my group. You should join my group. It's a test group. Well, I don't even know if it's a test group. I think I'm invested in it now. So I noticed that on Facebook, when I would share papers and journal entries and stuff like that, it wasn't really welcomed. Oh, sorry. I don't know why my mic does that. Anyway, sorry for the popping sound. Yeah, so I'm going to be posting Elizabeth Harman's paper in this group, and be interesting to chat about it.